Okay,
Are we live? Okay. Starting on chapter 9. Jesus heals a man born blind. And as we read this, it'll tell you that that guy was blind, and then he'll be able to see, but the ones who are questioning are blind, and they'll never be able to see. It sort of relates to before you're a Christian, you're blind. And that's what that one song says. Once I was blind, but now I can see. So we'll start on this one. And as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. The disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, for that guy to be born blind had been a bit hard for him to sin before he was born. So, and that's what a lot of people think now. If you get a child that's deformed or mentally ill or has Down syndrome or anything like that, it's something the parents did or their grandparents did or somebody did along the line that caused this to happen. And a lot of times you get that, and it could be just for the parents' growth. You know, once you have a child, and it might have autism or something, you know, and most people would have had an abortion, but a lot of times there'll be a heaven sent thing. If you watched America's Got Talent, and Cody, he was an autistic guy. But once he got up there to play the piano and sing, he switched completely over, and that was his gift. And he's at Las Vegas now singing. But yeah, he had autism and was blind, and but music was his thing. And you know, his mother caught on to that early and realized it. And yeah, he's so intelligent in the way songs are. Said he'll listen to them once, and he's got the music. He might have to listen to him twice before he knows all the words. All he has to do is, because he's blind, all he has to do is listen to him, and he'll memorize the whole song. How many people could do that? you know, sometimes I used to deliver lumber to a place where people was mentally handicapped or something. They had workshops where they could build stuff. And I got to thinking, I thought, well, you know, who's really mentally happy? And every time I walked in there, all of them was just waving at me and just as happy as could be. And I said, how many places you walk in that everybody's just so happy, you know? There's always people who have problems. They didn't have any problems. They just like to see people, and it was just an interesting thing, the thought process that I had, you know, running into people like that. And that's the way it is a lot of times with people with Down syndrome. Even though they are really caring people, and they love attention, and they love the people who pay attention to them. So, you know, we got to look and say, well, you know, who's the smart one and who's the handicapped one, you know? We might be handicapped more than them because we got all the problems of the world, and they don't have that. They just live their lives. So we'll go on so we can finish this. So, but neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. I always want to say Jesus said. I don't. But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And how many times do we hear that? How many times has Jesus already told us that he's the light of the world? That was the first thing he told us when we started John. John told us that. Jesus didn't, but John had heard it from Jesus. And so he keeps telling us, and people still don't want to listen to him. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, is this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed he was, others, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am he. But, in reality, if he had been blind and begging, he would have had a wholly different appearance than once he could see and started moving around,
Right.
And if you travel a lot of different places, you actually see people who look like other people.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes you can see people that's almost identical. So, in a way, you can see what they're saying here. And he replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me, go to Siloam and wash. So when I washed, then I could see. Where is this man, they asked him. I don't know, he said. So here they take him to the Pharisees. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day of which Jesus made the mud and opened the eyes was on the Sabbath. So that was, I looked at that and I thought, well, what would it be to make a little mud and put it on the guy's eye that would be against the Sabbath,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he didn't run around the pond 4 or 5 times or anything. He just made some mud, put on his eyes, and told him to go wash it off. It's a thing they get caught up on the law, and like I said before, they forgot the love of God. That it was such a fantastic thing that this guy could see after he did this. That wasn't what they was looking at.
Right.
So therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. But he put mud on my eyes, the man replied. I washed and I could see. Now, he did cut the scenario down a little bit. He just said he made mud, put it on my eyes, and I washed and I could see. He didn't have to go to the Siloam and everything. Sometimes in the Bible they go through the whole thing all over again, but he didn't. He just cut it short. Now, as I read this guy seems like he's a very intelligent guy. But some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But the others asked, how can a sinner perform such signs? So they was divided. Then they turned again to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. The man replied, he is a prophet. They still did not believe that he had been blind and had received sight until they sent for his parents. Is this your son, they asked? Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it now that he can see? We know this is our son, the parents answered, and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who already decided that someone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That was why the parents said this. He is of age, ask him. So they'd already made up their mind that they wasn't going to listen to anybody, because if they said Jesus was the Messiah, they were just going to throw him out immediately. You know, they didn't want to hear anymore. And I was thinking sometimes this same process is used by prosecuting attorneys and stuff. Said, well, if you just say that you did it, I can get you off with a year or two. If you don't say it and you're found guilty, you're going to spend 15 or 20 years in prison, you know. So it's easier to say, yeah, I did it, and take the lesser penalty, even though if you didn't do it, you think you'll be found guilty anyway. So it's just one of those thoughts that run through my mind, and that's basically what these Jewish leaders is using on these people. Said, if they think that he's the Messiah, then they're going to throw him out of the synagogue, and they don't want to get thrown out of the synagogue. So a second time, they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God by telling the truth, they said. We know this man is a sinner. He replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I do know, I was blind and now I can see. So this guy's kind of putting it to him kind of bluntly, you know. I'm enjoying this guy's conversation with him. Even he's smarter than the Jewish leaders. Then he asked him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And he answered, I have told you already, and you did not listen. And that was their problem, wasn't it? They couldn't listen to anything. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciple too? Now that was a thorn in their side when he said that. They hurled insults at him and said, you are the fellow's disciples. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. So see, they're lying again because they know where he comes from. And this guy answers them again. The man answers, now, that is remarkable. You don't know where he come from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. So even this guy knew that you needed to do what God asked you to do, you know. No one has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not of God, from God, he could do nothing. To this they replied, you are steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. I enjoyed that part. This guy was smart enough that he knew more than they did, and he really didn't even know Jesus that well yet. He just knew he had made him where he could see. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he, sir? The man answered. Tell me so that I may believe in him. And Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. Then the man said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into the world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. And the Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what, are we blind too? And Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claimed you can see your guilt, your guilt remains. So I thought that was kind of interesting there at the last. And I think what he was saying was that you've had the Word of God all along. They're Jewish people, they study the Bible, and they should have known. They should have been able to see. And being that they was able to see, they should have known Jesus and loved him. They didn't, so their guilt remains. So, anything in that? I enjoyed that whole thing. We kind of just read through it without much commentary in it, but it's sort of self-explanatory. I mean, Jesus opened this guy's eyes, but he was a very intelligent guy. And it's different than it was, remember the crippled guy and he come up to him and said, don't sin anymore because something worse might happen to you. So there's a lesson in each one of these, that, like we said before, people go to God in prayer and get their prayer answered, and then just turn around and go back to doing what they was doing before, instead of thanking God and try to follow him, being thankful for what happened. I think that's all we got, guys, unless you guys got something you stuck with you in that.
Just that last verse. So they knew they were exposed to Jesus, and since they rejected him,
Yeah, they should have known. Everything was there, all the
Right.
prophets, and they, except Moses and Abraham, and both of them told them about Jesus
Yes.
coming. And all the prophets in between told them. And now he's here, and they still don't want to.
Right. They still don't see it.
So that'll be it until next week.